Speaking of innovation, did you know, according to recent studies, nearly 40% of all skills considered essential today will change in the next 5 years? This brings us to our next engaging panel discussion on the topic Unlearning for Success, letting go of the old habits and embracing new leadership approaches. It's a timely discussion in an era where adaptation and flexibility are key to thriving professionally and personally. To dive further into this dynamic topic, we'll welcome to the stage Monica Perna, the founder, CEO of Globish Coach and Mentor at OG International Consulting, and our panelists as well. Welcome them.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Monica Perna, and I am a life coach, Globish coach, and the CEO and co-founder of a company named Auge International Consulting, a company based in Dubai, in the UAE, that offers educational solutions worldwide. And today I'm very pleased to host this panel discussion about unlearning for success. In a moment, I will introduce our panelists, but first I just would like to spend a couple of words about who I am. I am an Italian residing in the lively city of Dubai. As maybe you don't know, Dubai and the Emirates are not just a country in the world, but the world within a country, because there are more than 200 nationalities live together. And the English language is the language of communication. We always like to say that in Dubai and in the Emirates, we do not speak English, we speak Globish. That is the language of a global village known as the world. So that's why I define myself as a Globish coach. What I do with my company, Auge International Consulting, and its method is to help our students find, let's say, develop new habits and become leaders of themselves through and thanks to the English language. And today I'm so happy to have the chance to host this panel discussion with these amazing panelists that I'm gonna introduce right now. So we are gonna have Archie Tucker. He's the Senior Vice President of University Advancement at the University of Texas at Tyler. Sylvia Badwi is the chair and visionary behind Agora Prep Academy in Canada, a nonprofit learning environment for the creative geniuses of all abilities. Christine White holds the position of Chief Program Officer at the National FFA organization, offering guidance and leadership for both the national body and the educational initiatives. Rodney Tolson is the owner of Restorative Consulting Services LLC, a restorative practices coach, consultant, trainer, and continuing education instructor. Sean Shakarami is founder, speaker, professor, and author of Resonate Principles of Peak Performance. Please welcome our speakers with a big round of applause. Thank you. Please have a seat. Thank you so much. So in this panel, I will ask my speakers to express their opinions and ideas about three key ingredients of the recipe for success. Number one, the learning and unlearning dichotomy. Number two, learning friendly habits. And number three, leadership. After having taught more than 1 million students worldwide, I have come up with the formula that can really help us understand the heart of success in learning. Information multiplied by emotions equals unforgettable learning. As I also explain in my book, I Speak Globish, the key to successful and unforgettable learning is forgetting. Yes, before learning, we have to forget. But what should we forget? We have to forget our limitations. We have to forget what I call ends, automatic negative thoughts. I mean, limiting beliefs that can set our brain, our supercomputer, up for failure. Things like, I'm not good at remembering things, or I'm not good at sports, I'm not good at maths. These are just examples that can undermine ourselves. And the reason why Henry Ford said, if you can do it or you can't, you're right. Now, talking about the importance of unlearning for success, I would like to know, what do you think about it? Let's start with Sylvia, please.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, and I'm very honored to be here. I think unlearning has to start with us identifying first what we know is true, much like what Sean said in his speech. Not everything we see is actual reality. I think that we're all raised in a different way, and we have to decide what are those self limiting beliefs that you're talking about, Monica. But we also have to decide how this unlearning has to happen and why it does. I mean, all of us have different reasons, and I think that with raising the future generations and inspiring future leaders, all of us as educators and pedagogues, we need to really sit with ourselves and look at our learning model and education, because a lot of children, they turn off or they tune out of schooling, not learning. Learning is innate, it's inherent, it's in us. We don't have to teach it. We just have to guide it and we have to enrich it and cultivate it. So I think we just need to really redefine what learning should look like. And we need to abandon rote memory and testing and standardization and comparisons. And we need to actually evolve and look at the individual, celebrate the individual talents and go back to an inquiry based model. That's for me.
Thank you.
Is it my turn?
Yes,
Okay.
sure, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Archie Tucker again with the University of Texas at Tyler, Senior VP for Advancement. And for me, to my colleague's point, each of us come with our own biases, our own prejudices. We come with our own, from our own various diverse upbringings, right? In terms of what is right, what is wrong, how to do this, how not to do that. And when technology comes, it disrupts all of that, right? When we meet new people from other places that are not like us, that disrupts all of that. And so we have to unlearn what is not healthy. We have to unlearn what is not healthy for us, not healthy for our teams and our organizations, not healthy for our families individually. But we have to learn those things that are just the opposite of that. We have to learn what is healthy for us, learn what is healthy for our organizations, what creates or maximizes organizational efficiency, right? And so if we think along those lines, I think we're better off and our organizations are better off as well.
Piggybacking off that a little bit, learning is a lifelong process for everyone. So even as adults, it's not just about what are we telling students and what do they need to unlearn or what do we look at it from an organizational standpoint, but it's very personal. It's looking and reflecting individually. What are those things that are not healthy? What are some things that we learned because it was just the circumstance of the situations that we were in? And and being vulnerable enough to be able to recognize that, make those changes, and then also model that for the people who are around us. So whether you're a leader in a school, whether you're working in a nonprofit, it's how do we take what we have maybe been ingrained as our growing up, but how do we look at that in a reflective manner and make some really great changes that will be better, and what are some different habits that we may need to change along the way. So I think it's a lot, we're lifelong learners. And we're all in education and we know that and we preach that to our students and to everybody that we work with, but sometimes we need to look in the mirror and reflect back and look at it from our own personal perspective as well.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sean Shakarami. I have a little bit of an outsider's perspective. I'm a college professor, but I'm really more of an entrepreneur. And for me, when it comes to the subject of unlearning, what I've seen in the classroom, but probably more importantly, what I've seen in myself is our beliefs are born from experiences a lot of times. And I find myself, whether it's a traumatic experience or it could be something less traumatic of just having a bad day in the classroom and the belief stems of, oh, I'm not good at math because I did poorly on this test, right? These experiences can root beliefs in our mind if we're not careful, if we're not guardians of our mind. And what I've seen, at least in my own behavior in the past, is we try to fight the experiences. Meaning, so say you have a traumatic experience and you go into a fight or flight mode. We either run from the experience, that could look like being way too enamored in social media and just not taking care of your responsibilities, or where we try to wrestle with that experience in our mind. My biggest revelation when it comes to unlearning is we have to process the experiences, meaning we have to sit with them, be patient with them to process them emotionally. And rather than fight the experience, we need to fight the belief.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rodney Tolson again. Glad to be here. I want to piggyback off of everything my colleagues said. When I think about unlearning, and I do restorative practices in schools all across the country, and the same thing comes to the forefront every time. Unlearning requires of accepting difference and letting go of old beliefs. A lot of schools, we're stuck. We want to hold on to the way we did things 20 and 30 years ago. We get stuck right there. Or we're stuck with the generational gap. When I was raised, things were like this. If I did what you did, it was this. And we forget that in the community, we have to learn that every voice is valued in the community. And that's one of the things until we learn that every voice is valued and there's not a so called hierarchy, we won't get anywhere. But coming from a restorative standpoint, every voice is heard and every voice is respected. And that's something that we have to learn because the way we are taught is that if you're here, you're not listened to as much as a person here, and your voice doesn't matter. And the last thing I'll say, not to take up too much airtime, the one thing that we have to unlearn is that the student is not the customer. And we have to learn that in schools, the student is actually the customer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just would like to know if you want to add anything about what Sean said. The important thing to do is to fight not the experience, rather the belief behind the experience. Would you like to add anything about this point? You or also the others as well. Please, Sean.
So that really came through deep prayer and meditation as I fight through my own limiting beliefs. Is I just think, at least for me, and I only want to speak for myself, in my inner world, is our brains are programmed with the fight or flight mechanism, and we see the experience as the villain when really it's our choice to be victim or victor over the experience. But if we're going to put energy towards something, the energy should be towards healing our mind, which is fighting and deciding with our own volition what we choose to believe.
Thank you. Sylvia, please.
Um, so I don't do well with sitting because I'm ADHD. Is it okay if I stand up while I
Sure.
talk? Okay.
I'm
Thank you.
standing.
All right. Oh, thank
Fine.
goodness. Okay. I can't do the whole sitting thing for too long. So I really think that, to everyone's point, beliefs are stemming from, like we said, how we are raised. So it starts with obviously educating and bringing awareness to the parent population to make sure that they're not sitting there and only evaluating their child's intelligence or intellect through how their grades look. So in my school, we've abandoned report cards. We have assessments, cognitive assessments, academic assessments. They help benchmark the students to let us know where they're at, but it's an evaluative process and the student is brought on board. We celebrate what the student can do. We talk to them about their weaknesses. We set up goals in order for them to achieve it. That is not the same as getting a report card twice a year with A, B, C, D with some ranking. And it's like we're always norm referencing. We're always comparing students against each other. This belief that we are not enough, this belief that I could do more, I could be better, I want to be like my friend. It needs to all change. We need to eliminate that. We need to diminish the hierarchical thought processes in order to have a restorative community. In reality, we just need to take away all the standardized testing. We need to take out the evaluation, bring a more individualized approach to learning, but also celebrate every student because my students are 100% all abilities, which means gifted, spectrum, verbal, nonverbal, artistic, musical. They come to us from all walks of life, from all socioeconomic backgrounds. And if we can just celebrate every child for their purpose, who they're born to be, help them to understand what their purpose is, uncover it, and then cultivate it, enhance it through coaching, I think that's what's going to help us to overcome that self limiting belief.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And this would bring us to the second ingredient of our recipe for success, habits. Habits are an essential part of our daily life as they shape our behaviors, attitudes, and ultimately our success. The habits we form can either help us achieve our goals or hold us back from reaching our full potential. For this reason, I always say first you create your habits and then your habits create you. When I talk about habits, I include also tiny habits and their role in our identity. Tiny habits are key. Improving 1% every day may not be notable, but can be far more meaningful in the long run. And we might start a habit because of motivation, but we stick with it because it becomes part of our identity. Because at the end of the day, the goal is not to read a book, is to become a reader. It's not to run a marathon, is to become a runner. It's not to learn a new language, it's to become an effective communicator. And this is the reason why I created the notion of Globish, the English language used to connect with everyone and anywhere in the world. Talking about the importance of habits for success, what is your point of view about it? Please, yeah, yes.
Me again?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Whatever you guys say. So habits for success. I think they're critical. I think that if you don't have some type of, well, we'll talk about good and bad, but if you don't have some type of habit, right, um, it you are less structured, and that may be okay for some, not okay for others. Um, and so when you're talking about habits, you have good habits and you have bad habits. And so good habits lead to, good things occurring. Bad habits lead to bad things occurring. And so when we look at that, going back to my earlier comment, it's about, are those habits healthy? Are they healthy for you as an individual, your family, and those that are around you? Are they healthy for the organization? Or is it a habit that we need to unlearn? Right. And so in doing that, it takes self-assessment. It takes, I think my colleague said, looking in the mirror, right? Is this something that is bettering me? Is this something that is bettering the organization and my team and teams around me, or is it not? And those are questions that we can only answer, right? And it's important to recognize our habits before others, especially negative habits, before others do, right? Because that could be detrimental to us as individuals, to our careers, and certainly to our egos. And so those are my comments.
Is there a habit that, in your opinion, is supporting your success, or and on the contrary, a habit that you had to lose in order to become more successful in life?
Yeah, so for me, and I don't this is I'll speak for me. And so
Definitely.
I'm a religious oriented person, and so I do believe in prayer, and I do believe in reading about what it is I practice and putting those things into practice. So that's important for me, and so that's how I usually start my day, and that's how I end my day. So that's important to me.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Uh, So when I think about habits, sometimes habits just creep up on you and you don't really recognize them. It's not like I set out that I was going to make this as a habit. It just kind of happens as you go along. And so when I look at that from a perspective with self-reflection, sometimes you have to have that conversation of, is this a habit out of necessity? Is this a habit out of just circumstance? Or is this something that just kind of happened? Because you may have characteristics or different components. And so, one of the habits that I've had to unlearn is the idea of a hero's mentality. As an educator, as a mom, I always want to be able to be that person that can go in and fix it. As a corporate leader, as a chief program officer, I want to be able to kind of move the stuff out of the way so that my staff can do the best work that they have. But what I have found is having that as a habit, it actually puts strain on me, puts limits on my ability to really do my work because I'm too busy trying to take care of those around me. And so that's one of those when I've had that self moment reflection piece, had to really look in the mirror and say, by me doing that, what experiences have I taken away from my students, or what were the experiences that I've taken away from my son, or even from the colleagues in my office? And so being able to take a step back and allowing a lot of time for growth failure forward, giving those opportunities to support behind. But that was a habit for me that I had to really look deeply into because my intent was always really good. It was about helping others, but really, actually, I became a barrier for them to be successful and to continue to grow along the way as well.
So to piggyback off of Christine and Archie here is I'm a man of faith as well, and Scripture would tell you, protect your heart because from it flows life. And there's many proverbs that talk about the importance of using your words wisely. And to piggyback off Christine, sometimes we fall into these habits without even realizing it. And a great example of that is if someone were to come up to you and hit you physically assault you, you're probably going to defend yourself. You may not hit back, but you're at least probably going to put your hands in front of your face. You're going to do something to protect your body. The way that we, at least myself, sometimes get on social media and consume different forms of content, whether that's movies or music with violent lyrics, we are voluntarily poisoning our minds. And we just, as a society, don't have the education of guarding and protecting our minds just the same way that we protect our physical bodies. And how much more important is our mind than as just as our physical body is. Habits are born really out of neural pathways in our mind. And something that was brought up early on was getting into a state where you unlearn. There's a scientific word. There's scientific brain waves, and it's too long of a discussion to fully delve into right now. But I highly encourage you to do some research into some of the groundbreaking scientific studies into neuroscience and getting into an alpha brainwave state of consciousness, because it's in that state of consciousness where you're going to get into a flow state and be able to learn and unlearn at a higher level of consciousness.
Thank you.
And I want to piggyback off of you, Sean.
Please do.
Absolutely. Thank you. Also, being a man of faith, I think about habits. And I'm going to talk about a personal habit, then a school system habit. Personally, a habit is being slow to wrath. And I was a person that if you said something to me I didn't like, watch out. But I want to turn that into the school system when we're dealing with our babies and our children. How many people out there, raise your hand if you believe that the start of the day is very important for students and staff in the building, in the school building? Raise your hands. Believe the start. Awesome. One of the habits in the restorative school is being explicit and intentional about that start of the day. And Monica, when you talk about like a tiny habit, one tiny habit that we say is, how are students seeing you when they show up? Are we saying good morning? Are we smiling? What does our body language say? Monica, welcome to school. Happy you're here. Go to class. Take your hat off. So those habits, and in a restorative environment, one habit in restorative practice, you have something called explicit practice. But one of the great habits is that 80% of your interactions should be proactive in relationship building. 80%. Because you have to create social capital, because there are going to be times where you have to address things where people may do something, and that's the 20%. But it's the 80%, that intentional habit of being proactive, that creates safety and social capital for the 20%. So I would say, and that's something that as an educator I had to learn. I was a horrible teacher when I first started. My wife is right there and she would tell you. I was Mr. T, Samuel Jackson, whoever I was that. I was not restorative until I got in the habit of knowing that these students are my customers, and how I engage them, in my habit of saying good morning, smiling, created a safe educational environment. That's one of the best habits, I would say.
Thank you. Please, Silvia.
Just gotta stand again. Um, I am so glad I got to talk after you because basically what I wanted to say was a continuation of that. We have to abandon the habits in our schools, including schedules, including getting students to raise their hand. Actually, here, let's do a little exercise, interaction, so that you guys can wake up. How many of you had to raise your hand in school to go to the washroom, to ask to go to the washroom? Okay, pretty much all of us. Okay, and how many of you had to ask in order to grab a snack or to eat, which is a basic human need? And how many of you were allowed? Not a lot of you. You have to eat at a certain time. You have to eat with everybody else, and you're rushed to eat. So my middle child is on the spectrum. She's a foodie, and she enjoys separating her food in colors and textures and shapes. And she takes about an hour and a half to eat a meal that someone can take in 5 minutes. So as such, she would come home every day from traditional school hungry, hangry, actually, more like the Hulk, hangry. And I would just look at her lunchbox, and she loves to eat, and it was full. She never touched anything. And then the one time that she drank water, because I said to her, well, if you're not going to eat, because it takes you forever to eat and they rush you out to recess, at least you have to drink some water. Well, the one time she decided to drink the water in her water bottle, she had to go to the washroom. When she came back, she realized she's not finished yet. So she needed to go back. She was in grade 1. And the teacher said to her, "No, you can't go back to the washroom. You're just stalling. You don't want to learn this piece or whatever." So she basically accused her of lying about her bladder. And it's like, okay, who's going to pick up the tab of her psychiatrist, when she tells them about her grade 1 experience when she went to the washroom on herself? Anyways, the fact is, we have to stop with the habits that make us think that a school is a school because of the way things are being done. We have to undo those things. In our school, children go to the washroom when they want. The washroom's on site. They go when they need to. They don't tell anybody. This is a human need. Schools are a place for little humans to become future leaders. They're not little prisons. They're not jails. They can eat while they're working. Imagine that. They can work sitting in a hammock, standing up, sitting down, lying down. They can work with music on, and they can work in the dark. They can work in the light. They can work wherever they need to work. Because if you look at us, I don't know how many of you do this. Actually, let me ask you. How many of you have snacks beside you while you're working? Like, and you're nibbling on cucumbers or pistachios. I'm not going to judge you if it was chocolate. It's okay. But whatever it is you're nibbling on, it's a need. It's a human need. Why are we treating our children like even worse than some of our pets? So I think some of the habits we need to break are so insidious. It's like everything we know about what schools look like has to change. We have to change it. We have to transform it. And we have to start becoming inquiry based, Socratic method, and humanistic based. We have to celebrate children, respect them, and love them for who they are. That's my piece.
Thank you. Thank you. I just would like to underline something that pointed out from your intervention. We have to become able to protect our mind as well. What I usually like to say is that our brain is like tofu. We have to be careful about what we marinate it with. Otherwise, then there is no control about what we are inputting in our mind. And I'm also happy that the Pareto principle was introduced with the 80-20 percentages, because now I would like to talk about the third ingredient for success, leadership. Cicero, in Italian we call him Cicerone, said, "With confidence you have won even before you have started." I do think that leadership is a choice. It is a muscle that we can train in order to become the better version of ourselves. We do not have leadership, we do leadership. For this reason, in my book, I Speak Globish, I have dedicated an entire chapter to what I believe is the ideal ratio of the components required to speak a foreign language. 80% mindset and 20% knowledge. So 80% mindset, okay, and 20% knowledge. Why? Because in order to be here today in front of such an esteemed audience, basically composed of English native speakers, I don't need to know the same amount of words that all of you know. I don't need to have the same command of the English language that all of you have. And I don't need to sound like you because my roots are elsewhere. I mean, I am Italian and I don't want to pretend to be an English native speaker because I'm not one. But I do need to have confidence in my abilities. I do need to recognize my potential, and I do need to trust in myself. In other words, I do need to act as my own leader. As training facilitators, our major purpose is to help our students achieve their full potentials, as both learning and success are state dependent. So now, talking about leadership and the importance of becoming our own leaders, what is your opinion about this? Please, Silvia.
We can't raise leaders in a system of compliance. So back to my original point, they have to raise a hand about everything. They can't question authority. They can't challenge assumptions. We don't teach our children critical thinking. We don't teach them communication. We don't teach them creativity or communication, creativity, critical thinking. What's the fourth one? Does anyone know the 21st century skills? Collaboration. That's the fourth one. Thank you. So we don't really invest time in teaching them this. We're so caught up teaching math and science and language that we're not getting them to sit and think and reflect and talk about their thoughts and what their thoughts are on certain subjects, important subjects. We're not teaching them how to sew or cook or bake. We're not teaching them how to create. We're not teaching them. There's no time for all that because we're so consumed with the need that everybody has to learn the same thing at the same time. So leadership, I think, is rooted in uncovering a child's true purpose, understanding that every child has a different purpose. They're born to us a gift to this world. They were intelligently designed, and they're being told by social media and other avenues and agendas, very insidious, damaging, psychologically damaging agendas, that they can be anything they want to be. They can even change, their species if they want, if they would like to identify as something different than what they are. So we really need to be careful and really protect the child's self-esteem and self-confidence because those are the initial steps to leadership. And then we need to teach every child to be a leader in their own right. Leadership doesn't have to look the same for you as it does for me. I can be a leader in my own right. You can be a leader in one thing, I can be a leader in another. We're both still leaders. We're just not leading the same way. So we need to teach them the skills and the passion required to be leaders and teach them how to become the best version of themselves. That's my thought.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay. So I'm in higher education, and I'm an external relations guy, really. So what I do is I lead a team of individuals to raise money for the university that I work for, along with our healthcare system, and also experience government relations and all of that. So everything external relations, marketing, brand engagement. And so, in order to lead the teams that I lead, a couple of things. One, they have to know that I care about them. Just being really personal, right? If you don't believe that I care about you, you're not going to follow me. Now, I can manage you, but I'm not going to be a leader of you in this team if you don't believe that I care about you. So that's one. And your well-being, your career success, everything. Um, Leadership. The other piece of that is accountability. And so you can't be a leader, in my opinion, if you're not willing to hold yourself accountable first and then your team's accountable, right? Um, in my position, the buck really stops with me. And I accept that. I tell my team all the time because I try to pour a lot into them. I tell them everyone wants the title, everyone wants the salary that they assume comes with this. Everyone wants the profile, right? The respect that they think the title that comes with the title. But are you ready to make a hard decision? Are you ready to send someone home that may change the dynamics of their family? Are you ready to again make those tough decisions that are not necessarily popular? And so all of that comes with leadership as well. And everybody, oftentimes, we want all of the good things that we believe comes from it, but we don't think about the bad or those dark days or those tough days. And so accountability is core to this topic we call leadership, or the word we call leadership. In addition to that, actually, I'll stop right there because I'll go on forever. But so I do want to leave you guys with 2 points. Again, accountability, and then ensuring if you're a leader. How many of us manage, lead people? You have a team under you at all? Okay, so at least over half the room. And so again, make sure your team knows that you care about them as an individual. You care about their career success. I can tell you that I've built teams before they'll run through a wall for me. Brick wall, that wall, it doesn't matter. They'll run through a wall for me, and we have done that. And so that's the kind of team you want, but it starts with them knowing that you care about them, their well-being, and you're setting them up for future career success and growth, even if that means they leave from under your leadership and go somewhere else. You promote that, you push that.
So I think there's some unlearning that needs to happen when we hear the word leadership. I think a lot of times there's a very one version of what that looks like in today's society. I work for an organization that is really about developing premier leaders. And as we start to work with Generation Z, who are very different than maybe those of previous generations. They see themselves in a very different way. They look at things from a very optimistic standpoint. They may not know how to express themselves, but they are using that as an opportunity to become a platform to showcase and outline those pieces. And so I think sometimes it's really easy from a leadership role is that we want cookie cutters that may emulate what our leadership styles are. But I think it's being able to recognize that leaders come in all shapes and sizes. They have all different backgrounds, and the way that they lead, from a quiet leader to those that are going to be more boisterous, you know, those are things that need to be recognized and fostered and flourished in students, and giving them the opportunity to really be able to lead in their own way. So I think even when we kind of with this topic, as I was reflecting a little bit, I think there's some unlearning underneath the topic of leadership in general, because I think we might have our own stigmas of what we see. And when we don't see someone articulating just like how we lead, then we find defaults or faults in their leadership styles.
So I think my thoughts are similar to Archie's in many ways. And, almost everyone in this room raised their hand when he asked who was a leader. I'm going to ask another question. How many of us actually believe power is a good thing? Okay. So, some hands, but not all hands. And that was one of my biggest limiting beliefs was I used to think power was evil, right? You've probably heard the quote, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And while there's truth to that, and our society is very, very good at hand picking the worst of the worst case scenarios, right? That's how our minds are built, is to search out the negative. It's a form of self-protection. Where I'm going with this is John Maxwell defines leadership as influence. And influence, he says, is built from character and conviction. If you want to get to a position of what Archie was describing, where an immense amount of responsibility is put in your hands, it reminds me of the story of the ruler who comes and asks Jesus to come heal his daughter, and Jesus says he'll come, and he said, "No, that's okay. Just say the word, and she'll be healed." Because I have authority and I tell men to come and they come, and other men to go and they go. And what he was really saying was he has authority over people, and he's probably caused people to live and die based on his decisions, and he didn't feel worthy of the Messiah coming into his home. And Jesus said, by your great faith, she's been healed. I bring that up because if you want people to follow you, you first have to be an excellent leader of yourself. And that's through developing a strong moral character with integrity, with conviction to your values, and the values, if you work for a firm, upholding their values as well. That's where you're going to gain influence and where people will be willing to follow you based on your character.
Awesome, awesome. I'm going to jump on what all of my esteemed colleagues said. Couple of things. Good leaders are self-reflective. Good leaders are self-reflective, and good leaders Surround themselves with one or two people that can tell them when they're wrong. That is a very important part of leadership. Someone has to be able to say to you, I think you have it wrong this time. And the one thing that when I talk to principals and district leaders, I ask them two questions. One, who can talk you off the ledge? And who can tell you when you're wrong? Because as you talk about power, because if I'm in a position of power, someone has to keep me grounded how I use and distribute that power. And one of the things, so when we talk about restoratively, you're talking about, are you using fair process when you engage your people? Are you making sure where they might be on a compass of shame? What are you doing? Do you allow a place where people can show up as their authentic self? I'm going to give you a quiz, and I don't want you to tell us, but just think about which leader would you be in this situation. So let's say you have a presentation, the presentation to Monica. Monica's the CEO, and this is an important presentation. It goes horribly wrong. Every bad thing that can happen happens. And you're just sitting here present watching this presentation. Might as well jump off the top floor of Caesar's Palace. Who would you be? Would you be leader A, who gives everybody the death stare in the meeting? And everybody knows what's coming. Or would you be leader B? He or she holds it together. They go home and they talk, and you get that email, be at the office first thing in the morning, and you know it's going to be hell to pay. Or would you be leader C? Leader C goes home, de-escalates, and guess what leader C asked themselves? Did I, me, the leader, do everything I should have done to put my team in a position to succeed? They process that with themselves before they even engage their team. And whether good or bad, they have taken the time to process and self-reflect. And then if the answer is yes, I did, they strategize on how they can go back and not tear their team down, but actually identify the problem, and we go forward in a restorative way. So leadership is about self-reflection. It is about having someone that can tell you when you're wrong, and it's also about being restorative. As my colleague said, how do I show up as a leader, and do people want to work where I am? And Microsoft, one more thing, quick thing, Monica. I work for Microsoft, and they were having a lot of turnover. That's a long
I'm
story.
sorry to interrupt
Oh,
you,
sorry.
but I just have been informed that now we have the chance to welcome 4 questions.
Oh,
So
awesome.
maybe you would like to include this story in one of the replies from the questions, okay? So now, please raise your hand. No, sorry, please. Now, we just said, that it's better to encourage improvisation. Please go ahead with your questions. Please, yes. Archie,
It's fine.
Archie.
So oh, I was just going to say I actually love your thoughts on what leadership looks like, and I completely agree with you. I feel that as leaders, we need to invest in our employees, helping them learn and grow, even if they may leave us. I'm part of Wise Computing Academy, and my company, especially in Colorado, has such a high rate of employee retention, whereas many of my WISE counterparts struggle with employee retention. I believe one reason we see a high retention rate is because of the way we treat our staff. We show a lot of love and compassion, remembering small things about them, and helping them learn and grow, and being there for them. So if I were to impart some wisdom on leadership, I would say that practicing love and compassion is the key to being a great leader. So thank you for
Thank you.
your insights.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I say something to that?
Sure.
So as leaders, we have to be careful about the bridge that we build, because we may have to cross that same bridge one day. And so those that are coming under me, under my tutelage, leadership, whatever, my team, at some point, I may have to go work for them one day. they may have to say yes or no to bringing me on. Like you never know how this thing called life works and turns out, right? Today I'm on top, it could be the bottom tomorrow, vice versa. And so I'll just add that to that comment.
Thank you.
I want to add to that from a child perspective. Our children are going to decide which senior home we go to when we get older. So make sure that you treat them with respect as well, because once again, how we treat them and how we respect them into the world and build their character is how they're going to become leaders in the future as well.
Archie, I just wanted to say
Nice.
it takes a lot of courage to say what you just said.
I can't
So,
see who said. Oh, I'm sorry.
same here.
Same person. Okay. Thank you.
I was
Thank you.
just saying that it takes a lot of courage to say what you just said, that, someday, who knows, your employees might be in a bigger position than you, then you might end up working for them. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So Jacob Beasley, Accelerated Excellence. That has happened to me where an employee became my boss. So I have a question. So imagine you are a new leader and at an organization. And so I like this idea of restorative practices and building leadership within from self within the team members. If you were to go into a culture in which that type of leadership doesn't exist, where it's more transactional, bureaucratic, how then do you begin to shape the culture towards the outcomes that you are espousing?
Great question. Great question. May I?
Please.
One thing you have to do, you have to restoratively name what you're facing. And a lot of times there's a saying, my wife's principal has a saying, we can't solve a problem that's not known about. And sometimes people don't want to face the problem. So restorative, you have to identify this is what we're working with, and now how we are going to fix this. And I would say in a restorative environment, I always say you hear three words a lot: we, our, and us. So yes, we have this problem. It's not the end of the world, but how are we going to have courageous conversations? Because that's what it's going to take, courageous conversations, and identify and where are we going to start with those tiny habits, with tiny habit, because a lot of times when people face that, they want to like, it's real big, but we have to start small. And I have one thing I'll say, and I'll pass to one of my colleagues. I always say you have to have the Rome wasn't built in a day mentality whenever you're trying to go from one step to another.
I spoke a little bit about this in my earlier talk. Is whenever you enter an institution, whether it's a new job, a church, a school, there's a hierarchy already in place. And for me, it starts in my quiet time, similar to what Archie was saying, is you got to ask yourself, is this my calling, my anointing, my appointing to change this hierarchy? And if so, you're going to have to find allies within that institution. Or is this something I just need to understand and I'm in this season of my life, and perhaps it might change by me going to another hierarchy down the line, or with more experience, not saying you're not experienced, but more time in that enterprise, will you have more resources to start changing that? It's very difficult, and I'm just giving you realistic, practical advice. It's very difficult to change something when you're new. In fact, it can be detrimental to your career.
Can I add?
Yeah.
Like that's a great question, and so I get excited about this stuff. So great, you can tell. So great question. And so I'm one that's I'm new to my role. I say new, just under 2.5 years. But I was new to Texas. I'm from the South, originally from rural Mississippi. And so there's a saying that we have in the South. South, I know other people are from outside the U.S. The southeastern part of the United States. Let me say that. There's a saying we have in the South. You have to read the tea leaves, right? And so you have to read the tea leaves to see which way the wind is blowing. And so before you go and try to change, you need to make sure you understand the situation that you're in. You need to understand the internal politics. We haven't used that word, very important. The internal politics that exists within an organization and the external politics as well. You need to understand there used to be this show, Pros versus Joes. I don't know if you guys know about that, but anyway, but who are the pros and who are the Joes in the organization? Who are those that really have influence? And maybe that's someone that has the title to match. Maybe it's the janitor, right? Like who has the influence of those that are the decision makers, right? And so you may or may not, if you're not the chief decision maker, you may or may not be able to influence directly the decision maker. And so I've been in those situations many times where I'm, I raise money for a living, and so I'm going to someone that I need to see to raise. I can't get to that person. Who can get to this person? Who is connected to this person and has influence with this person? I'm going to work that angle. And so read the tea leaves, understand what you can do, what you can't do, and then understand what you're willing to stand for and what you're not willing to stand for, and just be willing to be okay with whatever the decision is, uh, based on what you select to or choose to do.
Thank you. We have time for a last question.
Check, check. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Um, this question is to two of you. The lady on the extreme, yes, and I'd also like to hear the perspective of the restorative gentleman on the other extreme. Now, I'm coming from a school. I have nursery primary school, and I have a secondary school. Each of them has about 20, 25, 30 students in each. And I'm wondering, everyone wants their opinion heard. Even when you say raise your hand, you're still going to get anti-I, Uncle I. Then you have to pick. So where do you draw the line between freedom and order?
Mhm.
And where do you allow, because I have this chica who, if you do not do that, chica will always be the one to speak and would speak over everybody in the class. And until she has spoken, no other person can speak. So when you were speaking, I was painting a picture at one of the classes, and I was like, no, this is not going to work. But instead of concluding, I just wanted to know, where do you draw that balance? Where do you draw that line? And how are you going to be able to work with opportunity and equity? I just in case, I just want to hear his own opinion, because he seems to come from another school of thought. Thank you.
Okay. Again, great question. One thing I'll say, in a restorative environment, you still have community norms. So you establish your community norms, and one of your norms may be take space, give space. And so in taking space and giving space, again, but we're dealing with children. So they're going to have to learn how to take space and give space. And so you're teaching. One thing I say as a trainer, when I train trainers, I say sometimes you'll have to say something like, you'll have a question, you'll say, for the interest of time, I can take 3 responses. And so you're not really making someone feel cut off because you're giving a norm up front. And then you can go into, hey, we heard from Chica. You may have to have a side conversation with Chica. Chica, hey, you know what? We love you. And we love that you are outspoken, but we want to give our other community members a chance to speak. So, Chica, sometimes I'm not going to call on you, not because I don't want to hear what you're saying, because we want to hear what everybody is saying. And just know that, and I agree with, and I know Sylvia's going to say, because we don't want to shut her down. We want to keep her empowered, and we want to keep that openness, but we also want to give space for the other people.
So Chica sounds a lot like my eldest daughter. She is 12 years old and she can't stop talking. There's no period at the end of any sentence. It's one run-on paragraph. Apparently, her mom is the same. So what we do is we have an unstructured structure. So we do have norms that are agreed. They're called community norms. The kids decide on them. They decide on the actions, the consequences. We do have a sensory room where children who are overstimulated and they feel like they're not being heard, they can go into the sensory room and they can choose a coach, one of the education leaders, or a peer, or our behavioral specialist on site to go and speak to them about how they're feeling. Now, we do have something called, it's literally a really ugly cone, construction cone. It's called the cone of dialogue. And the kids decorated it with some weird stickers. It's really cute. And basically, when we are having a discussion, in order to teach everyone to listen to each other, they have to pass the cone to the next person who would like to speak. So there are moments and times where we have to teach patience and turn taking, because this is real life. We're teaching them to be leaders. We have to teach them to listen, and we have to teach them to, how they can communicate and how to collaborate effectively. but we've taken out the other oppressive parts of the structure that doesn't really lead to natural learning. We've taken away the bells, no ringing of bells. We've taken away the different subjects that they have to do at a certain time in silos. So what we do in the beginning of the week is we hold them accountable. We ask them, what are you going to work on this week? Here's what you need to learn by the end of the year. In order to graduate grade 7, you need A, B, and C. So what will you attack this week? And we get them to actually declare it to everyone so that they're accountable to their colleagues. So you can have freedom and you can have structure, but the structure doesn't have to be oppressive. It can be complementary to the natural learning styles of the students. Is that good?
Thank you. Thank you so much. The time at our disposal is over. I'd like to thank, first of all, our panelists for their valuable advice, the conference organizers for inviting me to moderate this panel, and of course, all of you for your attention and your very interesting questions. At the end of the day, we learn to return and to earn in life. And this was the ultimate message of this panel. So thank you so much again for your attention and your time. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you to our panelists and our moderator for that last session.